to intent and effort, as I listened to what you were saying, um, when you were telling me about when you were telling us about the story of the kid who had the audacity to say, "I want to slap the black off of you," as unconscionable as that is, my mind and my heart aren't broken over the racial aspect of it. Is the fact that someone could have a heart that is so callous that they could have the intent to say something that they know it can cause harm, and that their intent is to cause harm. And so I guess the other thing I would want everyone to know, and this speaks to effort, is, you know, when it comes to critical race theory and it comes to being able to articulate matters pertaining to white privilege and everything else like that, it's become a systematic theology. And I want you to just consider in your own mind's eye, as you look at your social media interaction, how many people have been able to articulate white privilege and critical race theory from various different angles? How many of those people have been articulating the gospel of Jesus Christ with as much effort and as much prowess, right? And so what grieves me most, because I'm not going to say that racism is not an issue. Racism is an issue. You'll hear broken hearts and stories of broken hearts all day long. But what grieves me is that somehow within the church we are elevating racial reconciliation when it comes to racism. We're elevating that to a social gospel that is on par with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so whatever effort that we do towards reconciliation of people is not on par with the gospel, because ultimately Jesus called us, he commissioned us to reconcile the human race to himself. And so I'm not gonna debase anyone's effort in ministry for the specific area of racial reconciliation. You do you, that's cool. But where I will have a problem is if we try to say that is the same as proclaiming the gospel. And so our efforts, if the question is from anyone, I don't care what the color of their skin is, what can we do because we desire to be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ? We cannot put too much emphasis on being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ so that we can have fine, handy, and footwork, right? What we do as the hands and feet of Jesus Christ should confirm what our mouths are saying, right? Because our actions confirm what our mouths are saying. So if we're speaking the gospel, right, our hands and feet should be consistent with the gospel, right? And I don't think anybody would argue with that. But we can't allow our doing to be more elevated than our being, right? The reason why I was down in Biloxi, Mississippi is the military took me there, and I was at the Joint Service Weather School, and one of the first primary things, as I started to say that, there was a beautiful gust of wind. The first primary things we talked about was, here's a fallacy that we got to get your minds to wrap around before we talk about anything else. When we're talking about winds, prevailing winds or non-prevailing winds, we've got to talk about what they're coming from, not what they're going to. And so if you want to go to a place and do the work to get us to a place of racial unity, I have no qualms about that whatsoever. But it's got to come from, and the order from Ephesians, it has to come from that we're stepping out and up with the belt of truth around our waist, right? And our own personal righteousness in God, right? Being in right standing with the Lord, and us being right in our actions. And then we've got to be fit. We have to step out and up with the peace that comes from the gospel. And so my concern is that the enemy has us elevating things to be on par with the gospel. And you pick any ism. People are passionate about ageism. People are passionate about adverse poverty and other things, right? But if we come at the world as Christians, putting that stuff on par with the gospel, I fear that as a church we'll be standing it's in the pursuit of justice, right? As a church we'll be standing exposed before a perfectly just God, having not not having our waist, not being girded with the belt of truth and righteousness and the shoes of the gospel. And whatever we were trying to clothe ourselves with, unfortunately, will be hanging around our ankles, still covering up the gospel. And so, all of us as Christians, we need to understand that privilege is going to be on our lips. Before we start talking about privilege, white privilege, we need to recognize that we have the privilege, us, of being wholly sanctified, and that our whole spirit and body and soul can be made blameless until the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm sorry, I'm not gonna have folks elevate talking about white privilege to be on par with us fighting for them, because when we just fight for them who are experiencing these isms, then they're just remaining them. They don't become us. We have the privilege. And so if they, people of color, those who are experiencing various forms, those they and them who are experiencing different forms of injustice, they will always remain they and them. And my entire life in my ministry is devoted to serving them. I mean, literally, the S's on my uniform mean saved to save, saved to serve. So my life is devoted to serving them. But it cannot be at the same level of being content with them being them. Because otherwise it's just us. And there's no justice in that whatsoever. And so my challenge to the church is, let us be proclaimers of the gospel, and allow the gospel to do its job, is ultimately what I'm saying. Does anybody here know William Ford and Tom Lockett? Anybody know those individuals? This will blow your mind. So William Ford has this kettle. It's 200 years old. Passed down. There was a teenager in his family that said, our story as black slaves must be passed down generation to generation. No one could ever forget what we endured. So this kettle was passed down, and this gentleman, he carries it around as a part of his ministry. And the story is, his ancestors used to steal away to the barn and various other places, and they would take this kettle and they'd flip it upside down, prop it up on rocks, and they would lay prostrate before the Lord, and they would pray aloud into the kettle so that their voices weren't heard, because if the master heard them praying, they were going to get beat. And one of the stories that got passed down with this 200-year kettle is the story of a relative named Willie. Willie decided he wanted to go fishing one day without permission. He comes back, and his arms and legs are wrapped around the other side of the tree, and he's beaten with the cat of nine tails. And it's a bloody mess, and so they tried to cover him with lard and some bedding to stop the bleeding, but he ended up dying throughout the night. And so the master of this individual's ancestors was just cruel, and he used Christianity as a works-based platform. If you don't work hard enough, then you won't get into heaven. But he didn't want them praying, because if they prayed, then they would have hope, and if they had hope, then maybe they would consider running away or doing various other things. So anyway, meanwhile, fast forward, there's these two gentlemen, William Ford and Tom Lockett. Both have dreams. William's dream was that he literally dreamt of Dr. Martin Luther King, and he felt personally convicted about the animosity he harbored in his heart about people of white persuasion. Anyhow, a couple of years later, this takes him to the Lincoln Memorial in D.C. for a prayer meeting, because he wanted to do something about it. Tom Lockett, he ends up at this prayer meeting, and the two of them become great friends. They share life with each other. And the funny thing is that Tom Lockett, William says, well, there were some Locketts in my family too, but there was only one T to their name, not two like yours. And he's like, yeah, it's weird. Where do your family hail from? Well, my family hails from Kentucky. And then William says, oh, that's funny, because my people are from Louisiana anyway. So it's all good. Fast forward, these two gentlemen are learning about their past. Tom discovers that the Lockett family farm belonged to his ancestors. And the Lockett family farm is where slavery essentially ended, because that was the last battle of the Civil War. It ended on the Lockett family farm. His family owned slaves, and he's like, that's a horrible thing. Came to be, as you see where the story's going, it was Tom's family and his ancestors that owned William's ancestors at one point in time. So now William has a face, like, your people killed my people. You know, your people enslaved my people. And so both of them had to reconcile a certain sense of humility and forgiveness that was insane. The two of these gentlemen have written a book called The Dream King. And so it's a play on words because of Martin Luther King, and they were literally met and standing in the place where Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. But anyway, so also it was found out in Tom's family that there was a man who was in his family. There was they had like 16 brothers. And one man, he ended up getting Jesus in his heart. He went to a revival meeting, he got saved, and he became an abolitionist. So in his family line, he had both abolitionists and slave owners. Anyway, the whole point of me sharing that with you is that we can endeavor all day to do the good work that we can. We're gonna fall short, and where we're weak, His strength is gonna be made perfect, right? And His grace needs to be sufficient for us. At the end of the day, these two men made individual choices for Jesus Christ, and it's that choice, the gospel, that brought them together to reveal this God-sized story that's bigger than anything. It's insane when you think it. Only God can do something like this. It's like now these two guys are partners in ministry together, brothers in the Lord first and foremost, and it is absolutely incredible. I encourage you to know more about their story, but that was just to say that the battle doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the Lord. And I talked longer than they did, so I really apologize for the disparity there.
No, it's good. Thank you.